Pagoo, Chapter 13, The Grotto of Eating Trees. Pagoo felt that he must go after that snail shell. He had seen it pop from the center of the sea anemone and had watched it roll from that gay flower to the tide pool floor beneath. He raced down the rock to search for it. He came to the place where the other hermit had slipped and fallen. Weeds slid out from under him and broke loose. He couldn't hang on. He, too, was slipping. Directly below him stood the same anemone which had swallowed a snail before his very eyes. But it was still tightly closed and did not spread its tentacles to snare him. He bounced on its rubbery bulges and dropped to the floor. All about him crowded an ancient, fantastic jungle. Anemones reared above Pagoo like stout palm trees of blazing colors. In the watery sunlight, their fronds seemed to be jeweled and gilded. Pagoo walked on the sandy floor in swirls of liquid gold and shadow. With those rainbow colors arching above, the witchery of the place might have enchanted a more sensitive soul, but Pagoo was made of sterner stuff. He was not struck with the staggering beauty around him. He was just staggered, that way, to keep under cover. He must find that new empty snail shell. Sneaking along with his tail part tucked under, Pagoo blundered into a fairy cave. The rock walls of this dusky grotto were hidden beneath a crowded forest of growth. The roof was hung with ferns and bushes growing upside down. Pale, lacy nets of growth spread out near blooming mosses. This mysterious grotto seemed fairly alive with shadows, and the place was alive in more ways than one. Things were not what they might seem to be. The blooming moss, the lacy nets, the hanging ferns and bushes were really colonies of very small animals. Most of these bryozoan colonies look like plants, each animal budding out from its neighbor, but each traps its own sea soup food using rings of slender tentacles. Just as trees tower above underbrush, other animals here stretched above the bryozoans. These hydroid colonies were also built by hundreds of tiny creatures growing in orderly rows. Some hydroids grow like slender palms with waving plumes. Each animal traps food for the colony with stinging tentacles. Pagoo once had traveled with children of hydroid families, tiny medusa jellyfish. Medusas pop gaily away from their stay-put family tree, join the sparkling plankton ballet for a generation, and even have baby jellies who can swim. But these babies, as though bored with the life of their wandering parents, return to shore. They settle down and start stay-at-home hydroid colonies, like the original family homestead. Pagoo found what he was after in this grotto of eating trees. He found not only one snail shell, but a whole treasure of shells. Since the anemone jungle sloped down to the grotto, shells dropped by anemones or brought by waves rolled into the cave. Here were snail shells of many kinds and sizes, and all these snail shells were empty. "Well," said Old Pal, "so little old Pagoo has hit the jackpot." Was it all a dream? Pagoo didn't know where to start. He began trying on one shell after another in a frenzy of joy. But at last Old Pal got an idea into Pagoo. "Look, boy," he cried, "after all, you can wear only one shell, so find that one." A fat little periwinkle shell fitted Pagoo. His small, soft body curled into its curves as though made for this place. The door was too wide, but with both gloves he could close the opening fairly well. Pagoo did not start running in wild loops as he had done with his first snail shell, the horn. With dignity he walked from the deep, hidden grotto of eating trees and sat on a stone. Here the little fish found him. Since bringing meat that time to the landlady of traveling towers, The small-mouthed fellow had used any crustacean at all to shred meat for him. He towed meat to shrimps and left those pale creatures to work on it. Shore crabs, swimmer crabs, any crabs at all were very useful, just so long as they didn't catch and shred him along with the meat. Sometimes a huddle of shrimps didn't understand when he dashed back to claim his tiny morsels. Shrimps exploded in all directions, but they came back. The small fish kept everyone satisfied. Pagoo was so startled when the small fellow swished up to him that he crouched far back in his shell and put up both gloves. When he looked out, there lay a nice piece of steak and a job to do. He cut and shredded that scallop meat for all that he was worth. If hermit crabs can feel flattered, Pagoo should have felt a warmish glow even in cold ocean water. To be given a job like this to work on meant that young Pagoo was now large enough to be noticed. He wasn't sitting upstairs in old traveling towers watching the landlady below and hoping. Pagoo himself was carving. Of course, he ate his share. He did so well that he sprayed meat particles all over the scenery. Tidal currents caught them up and carried the news around the corners. Not only the small fish returned, but hungry shrimps, hungry worms, hungry hermits, hermits in all sizes. Pagoo had rested from hermit fights of late and had almost forgotten the rude ways of his own tribe. Clutching as much steak as his claws could hold, Pagoo retreated. He scuttled toward his grotto of eating trees, his new periwinkle shell bumping along behind. All the gang followed. They clawed and pulled at Pagoo's tasty lunch. They knocked his little shell around, reached into his too wide doorway, and pinched him with no mercy at all. He tried to block that doorway, but his gloves were much too small, and he had no more chances to taste the feast he had so carefully prepared. Pagoo had learned something. An old instinct made it a fact by saying, "Yep, you may be a little larger after that last molting, but not yet large." It was only too true. As yet, he could not hold his own against the big boys. And this doorway, why hadn't he chosen a better shell? That hole was much too wide. Oh well. When this rumpus was over, he would go back there and get another house with an opening he liked. He knew where he could get it. Pagoo almost smiled.